Today on The State of Us, we're going to break down President Biden's $1.85 trillion spending framework that was unveiled to Congress. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, by our friendly redneck liberal, Lance L. Jackson. And today, we've got healthcare, climate change, education and childcare, taxes, housing, food aid, elder care, immigration. Just a few things to talk about, a little bit on the agenda today. But before we dive in, Lance, what is the word of the day?
Is this new bill an example of megalomania, or is it more of a common sense bill? Megalomania is the word of the day. Megalomania. 6 syllables. It is a noun meaning a passion for or for doing big things. We looked at 3 trillion, right? 3 trillion plus, and now we're looking at 1.85 because of Senators Sinema and Manchin. So is this just a good, positive move forward for the country, or is it another example of an idea which would be defined as a megalomania?
First up, Lance, healthcare. The proposal on the table would extend the beefed up Affordable Care Act subsidies through 2025, but it does not make them permanent, as obviously a number of Democrats had initially hoped they would do. This seems to be one of those areas where I wonder why that concession was wanted. Maybe you have a thought on why not have just made it permanent. Maybe they're hoping that they'll be able to do something better in a number of years. But again, couldn't you just make it permanent and then replace it if you come up with something better?
Well, I'm not sure you'd get the votes for that. And, we're going to talk more about it later, but I think this is really an example of President Biden trying to reach out and be bipartisan, trying to negotiate, trying to get people on board, and an example of let's take what we can get versus let's not do anything. I think there's a real desire to get something done. And I think just that anytime you look at something and you say we're going to do this forever, you're automatically going to get pushback. So better to get it in for 6 years than to meet pushback for trying to get it in forever.
It would also help provide healthcare coverage to people without any in the 12 states that choose not to expand Medicaid. So it helps provide access to affordable options for those people. I guess the biggest critique of this section, Lance, of the healthcare component, is what you and I have been saying for a long time, which is Obamacare was a step perhaps in the right direction way back when it started, right? The Affordable Care Act. But over time, as it's been hashed away at and that it hasn't been reworked, it's going on a decade old now. So it's probably time to do a major update and overhaul, which I think everybody agreed 5 or 6 years ago needed to be done, and was not done.
But again, this all started back during the Great Depression, and then Lyndon Johnson added to it in the 60s, and Bill Clinton tried to add to it in the 80s and was rejected. And then Obama got this in 2010, 2008, 2010. So this is an ongoing thing, right? Everybody's like, well, let's just do this and let's just get it right. And well, wait a minute, folks, we've been working on it for 80 years as a nation, as a government. It started under Roosevelt in the Great Depression. And then we added to it in the 60s. We tried to add to it to the 80s, and we got into the 21st century, and we've done this. So we're really tinkering with something that has been around for 80 years in some form. And I'm talking about healthcare for a certain group of people. They wanted it for everybody, but we do it for a certain group of people. Then we're going to expand it to a bigger group of people. And now Obamacare is just another expansion of what was done in the 30s and the 60s.
Yeah. So, I guess of all the things in here that's a kick the can down the road kind of thing, it's the one that I'm the most okay with. Doesn't mean that I love it, but that's basically what we're doing is, giving us more time with this to say, we don't want everything else to fall apart because we can't sustain this one component.
Well, just very quickly, though, I am upset with the fact that we're not doing anything to help cut the cost of Medicare, because there was a proponent, a thing in there that said Medicare could negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies. And that's out because that met too much resistance. And it's like, the
most common sense thing.
We had something in there that could help cut costs, which would save tax dollars. And we're not going to have that. But we're not going to have that. Again, I'm not really blaming the president for this one, but he has to take it out because his own party is saying, we're not going to support it. And the Republicans are like, well, we're not going to support it. If you can't even get your own people on board, we're not going to do anything to make you look good. You know what I mean? That's the other thing, is we've gotten away from the idea that, aren't we supposed to, you all guys, gals that are in Congress, aren't you supposed to be doing what's good for the people of the country and what's good for the country as a whole, not what's going to get you reelected?
Well, and we know that about 70% of Americans, right, support allowing the government to, because it just seems like such a dumb, like, what do you mean Medicare can't negotiate?
Right. The majority of us agree that this needs to be done. And it's the thing that's taken out.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, because, just transparency with listeners, right? Some of you are already there. For those of you that aren't, it's because we have lots of congresspeople on both sides of the aisle that are bought and paid for by Big Pharma. And they've gotten the directive that, hey, you like your job, then you're not going to support this because, it's better for us to basically take whatever we want from the government and waste taxpayer money because we don't give the government the authority to negotiate these prices.
And I believe that if I was an elected official and I went to my constituents and said, Big Pharma is threatening me that if I support this idea, they're not going to give me money. Well, you know what? This is right for you. And I work for you. I don't work for Big Pharma. Why don't they just do that? That seems so, call them out. Be transparent. So you know what? I was taking money from them. Now I think they're doing the wrong thing. They're going to come after me in the next election. I hope you realize I'm working for you. And then let the chips fall where they may. Do the right thing. That's all I'm asking. Do what we sent you to Washington to do.
Next up, climate change. This may be, I think it is the single largest component of the $1.85 trillion spending plan. It's about $555 billion in climate measures. $320 billion of that $555 is in 10-year expanded tax credits for utility and residential scale renewable energy development, improved electric transmission and storage, electric vehicles, and clean energy manufacturing. So basically, this is an expansion of some existing tax credits, but also adding some new ones that are all around the basic idea of making it cheaper to go toward climate-friendly means of energy and production and transportation, all of which, to the episode that we just did recently, I don't think we need to rehash. If you listen to that, right, we have subsidized oil and gas pretty much almost since its inception, at least for the modern era. For while we've all been alive that are listening to this show, it's been subsidized. And so this is not crazy. I think we know, in my mind, we have to do this, right? It is an investment now to try to maybe prevent some of the worst consequences of climate change.
Have you watched the news or an athletic event this week from the west coast of the United States through the southern states up into New England? The huge amounts of wind and rain for this time of year. And they're all saying, it has to do with the climate change, with the warmer earth. It's on everything, okay? It's affecting everything in all parts of our country. We're not even talking about the world. So, can you still be a denier? I guess so, but look out your window. It's as simple as looking out your window, looking at your thermostat and hearing the heat kick on earlier and earlier, and the amount of rain we're having, and it's causing mudslides, trees falling down. Oh, well, wait a minute. The reason the trees fell down this time is because the leaves are still on the trees. And this time of year when the wind picks up, the leaves are usually gone. This is what, the weather people are telling us. So it's their job. So unless you've got that degree and you know more than they do, they're all just out and out admitting, yeah, that's why we're having this kind of weird weather that we're having this fall. So I guess you can be a denier, but not to do anything about climate just seems like about as Neanderthal an action as you could take. Is like, well, this isn't that bad, and this has happened before. It's like, really?
Well, we're pretty much the only major civilized nation in the world that makes this a partisan issue, right? Because, I mean, you look at our European counterparts, and for the most part, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. I mean, you take the United Kingdom, right? One of our closest allies, and definitely somebody that's similar in terms of, demographic political breakup. The Conservative Party and Boris Johnson, their prime minister right now, has been announcing major changes in climate legislation in the United Kingdom because they don't look at it as a partisan issue. It's this is just a world problem that we all face. So it's sad that in the United States it is a partisan issue because it's so, and I think it is changing. I mean, in fairness, I think it's too slow that it's changing, but it is changing. We are seeing that with the younger generations across the political spectrum, people are accepting that this is something we have to do something about. So it also includes $105 billion to boost resilience to the effects of climate change, such as wildfires and droughts. So this is improvement in building materials, responsiveness, et cetera. $110 billion to grow U.S. supply chains for renewable energy technology. This is trying to avoid what we could run into later, which is the demand is there for all this stuff, but we're unable to meet the demand because of the supply chain. So I think that that's really wise to have in there. And then $20 billion to motivate the government to purchase cutting-edge energy technologies. Basically, it's money set aside to say, the government's the single largest employer in the United States of America. It operates massive amounts of infrastructure, buildings, all kinds of stuff, and it makes a heck of a lot of sense for it to be leading the way by example on putting this stuff in place. So, again, to Lance's point, it should be, of this whole thing, it should be the simplest one to say, yep, let's get her done, because it's something we know we have to do something about. We have to invest in it. There's just really no way around it. So coming up, education and childcare, housing, food aid, taxes, and more. To find out what specifically is happening with those, keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. We now get to talk about Lance's number one subject, education and childcare. The framework includes a signature priority for Mr. Biden, and that is federally funded preschool for all 3- and 4-year-olds in the United States. The free preschool program is funded for 6 years by this plan. Additionally, under the framework, families who make up to 250% of their home state's median income will spend no more than 7% of their income on childcare. And basically, there's some qualifications for the program, which I was a little surprised to see in here, but am glad to see them in here. And that is that parents must be working, seeking work, or in training, or have a serious health condition. So in other words, you either have to be employed, actively seeking employment, getting ready for employment, or you're ill to a state where you're incapable of, doing a regular job.
Well, I mean, the big part here for me is the federally funded preschool. Every educational study over the last 60, 70 years has said you get the most out of your dollars to spend money on this age of children. That the more prepared they are to enter school, the more likely that shows the trends. Every study that's been done every decade shows that kids that have a good start when they're 3 and 4 years old on learning the basic ideas of numbers and colors and things like that do much better by the time they get to high school and are much more likely to get their diploma and enter the workforce, go to community college, go to technical school, whatever. I mean, the numbers don't lie. It's always been there. That's why back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson said, we're going to do this for poor kids, hoping that it would expand. And I was a beneficiary of that I got to go to preschool because it was a government entitlement program. I lived in a rural part of Missouri, and we qualified for me to go to preschool. And it set me, not that my parents weren't doing what they needed to do at home. And again, if you don't want this, fine. We're not even going to talk about how it helps people get back to work who have to take care of their children, because their children are in preschool. But I'm just talking about the very simple fact of it's shown it's a 3-to-1 ratio, dollars spent in preschool versus dollars spent in high school. You get 3 times more out of the money spent on children in preschool.
For the framework, families who make up to 250% of their home state's median income will spend no more than 7% of their income on childcare. And basically, there's some qualifications for the program, which I was a little surprised to see in here, but am glad to see them in here. And that is that parents must be working, seeking work, or in training or have a serious health condition. So in other words, you either have to be employed, actively seeking employment, getting ready for employment, or you're ill to a state where you're incapable of, doing a regular job.
Well, I mean, the big part here for me is the federally funded preschool. Every educational study over the last 60, 70 years has said you get the most out of your dollars to spend money on this age of children. That the more prepared they are to enter school, the more likely that shows the trends. Every study that's been done every decade shows that kids that have a good start when they're 3 and 4 years old on learning the basic ideas of numbers and colors and things like that do much better by the time they get to high school and are much more likely to get their diploma and enter the workforce, go to community college, go to technical school, whatever. I mean, the numbers don't lie. It's always been there. That's why back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson said, we're going to do this for poor kids, hoping that it would expand. And I was a beneficiary of that I got to go to preschool because it was a government entitlement program. I lived in a rural part of Missouri, and we qualified for me to go to preschool. And it set me, not that my parents weren't doing what they needed to do at home. And again, if you don't want this, fine. We're not even going to talk about how it helps people get back to work who have to take care of their children because their children are in preschool. But I'm just talking about the very simple fact of it's shown it's a 3-to-1 ratio, dollars spent in preschool versus dollars spent in high school. You get 3 times more out of the money spent on children in preschool than you do trying to catch them up and get them through once you find out they're behind when they get to high school and they're not on track to graduate. So it's better to fund it up front than it is to fund it in the back by 3 times. This is a no-brainer to me. 6 years, again, I hope that means people are going to say, this was wonderful, and we're going to do it forever. This is the smartest way we can spend money in education, bar none.
And the research is out there to show us, like Lance said. I mean, we did for years. We produced a podcast on this network from the Committee for Economic Development in Washington, D.C., where one of the Committee for Economic Development, one of their primary standing policy areas was early childhood education. And I think that tells you everything you need to know.
How do you grow the economy in the
United States? Education.
Early childhood education. That's what the people who run businesses say.
Yep. So now the problems that I have, which are unrelated to this, one is that under the framework, families who make up to 250% of their home's state median income will spend no more than 7% of their income on childcare. So just doing the math here, if your state's median income was $70,000, then if you made up to $210,000, you're going to have to spend no more than 7% on childcare. It seems a little high given that breakdown. I'm not saying that I don't think there's merit to the principle here, but 250% seems fairly aggressive. I like the regional nature of it because I think, as you know, if you've listened to the show, Lance and I are big on regional adjustability because this blanket approach across the United States often is unfair to the poorest and the richest. It either unfairly benefits one or it hinders the other because it doesn't take into account the extremes. And when you do a regional approach, so anyway, I'm just saying it would be something that I'd want to look more into and better understand the rationale behind that. Why is it 250%? I mean, that seems like a lot. It also includes a 1-year extension of a child tax credit the Democrats expanded as part of COVID-19. We did a whole episode on this, folks, so go listen to it. I think the synopsis was, it's crazy that you could be somebody who has a stable job, stable income, and you're going to get these checks that you don't need to take care of your kids. Should it be available to people below a certain income threshold? Probably. But should it be available to, somebody like Lance, if he has kids running around? I don't know. I mean, that's a harder sell, right? Especially when you could say, well, we could spend that same money and invest in early childhood education, which we know would have a bigger impact.
Or as we talked about on that show, increase the minimum wage, and then the people who are working get the money to help with their children. Because that's who they're trying to get. They're trying to get those people to be able to better take care of their children who are working to try to take care of their children. So take that money, instead of just giving it to everybody, increase the minimum wage, and then those people that are working
can afford it,
can now afford to take care of their kids better.
I mean, I think the point is on this one, again, the idea behind addressing the cost of taking care of children, that's solid. We want to address that. Some of the ways that it's being addressed are Band-Aid simple solution things that really don't solve it. They just make us all feel better like we tried to do something. And that's what I feel about the next one too. Increasing the maximum size of Pell Grants for college students, invest in workforce development programs, and provide support for historically Black colleges and universities. I'm fine with investing in the workforce development programs. I think that's great. I think the Pell Grant thing, again, I feel like that's a Band-Aid. So because colleges and universities cost more now, we're going to make more money available to go to them. Why don't we address why they cost so much in the first place?
Well, and one of the biggest things we're hearing too is people graduating or not graduating from schools and not finishing, and then being saddled with huge debts. Why make more money available to them? That seems counterintuitive to what we're hearing as a problem. If people are having trouble paying off the debts that they've incurred already, why allow them to borrow more money? Again, podcast thestateofus.org. Tell me where I'm wrong here, people.
What's the friendly redneck liberal not got right
tell
about
me where
this?
I'm wrong here. But let's see. You're in debt. You can't pay off your debt. Your debt is keeping you from becoming a more contributing member to society. Your own words, you millennials. And now you say, well, we need to have more debt. I don't understand that. I'm sorry. So,
well, because keeping in mind, right, it's that whole, but the Pell Grant, I don't have to necessarily pay that back, right? But somebody has to pay it back. We all still have to. And that's like, I feel like that's the thing that everybody just, it'll be, free college.
Yeah, it's
like
free. It's not free.
It's not free, because those universities can't operate for free. The professors aren't going to show up for free. The lights aren't going to stay on for free. We're not going to put up new buildings for free. The money has to come from somewhere. And again, I think as we've talked about before, the better solution and approach here is to tackle the increasing issue of the rising cost of college, partly because we're sending so many more people to college, and then we're hit really hard on the back end, right? All these trade jobs, you can't find a plumber, you can't find people to do construction, you can't find a good electrician, on and on and on and on. And the cost of those things is skyrocketing. And here we are saying, well, let's throw more money at higher education rather than try to bring down the cost of it. Let's just, to Lance's point, let's just let people go further into debt to get something that's going to take even longer to pay off. And
I just want everybody to know, I'm not against paying taxes. I don't necessarily even grimace during tax year. My grandfather told me a long time ago, son, be grateful if you can afford to pay taxes. That means you have a job and you're making money. And I've always believed that. Okay. All I want is that my tax dollars be spent wisely and just not thrown down the drain. And it just doesn't make sense to loan people money in an area or to ask me to pay in an area where debt is already so great. There has to be a way to cut costs. There has to be a way to better spend the tax dollars that I'm sending that way. And I'm a believer in education, but I really am disappointed that because of Mr. Manchin, the whole idea of paid family leave is now out of this.
Gone.
I'm sorry, folks. It was initially put in it for 12 weeks, then they slimmed it down to 4. and now it's not there.
It's gone.
Basically, according to the article, because Mr. Manchin has raised concerns about this. Now, the article also says that several Senate Democrats are still fighting to put this provision in. We are one of the only developed countries in the world that doesn't have this. So this disappoints me greatly. Not that I'm ultra liberal. I'm just like, okay, you want people to take care of their children. You want people to be responsible parents. And then you're one of the few developed countries in the world that doesn't have this available for your parents who are having children. As I said, that's very quickly. I just want to make sure that people understand that that's not in there, that they are still fighting to get that in there. But that's one that I think they're going to get people upset about, not having that in there.
Well, you want to bring down the cost of childcare. One way to do it is to give parents more time to be with their child. So it's well, where do you want to put it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, again, research tells us that if the parents are able to spend more time with their children, especially early on, statistically, the better they're going to do. And so, again, not rocket science. It's just where do you want to invest it? Do you want to invest in the Band-Aids on the back end, trying to make up lost ground, or do you want to put it in the front end and prevent the problem from happening in the first place? To me, that's how simple that part is, and it's not really it doesn't have to be a big spending point. It's just if you're a organization out there over a certain size, you must offer XYZ to your employees. And I don't think that that's rocket science. So, but apparently it is. Taxes, housing, food aid. Those are what's to come. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Taxes, everybody's favorite topic. There's a number of details here. Basically, the major tax provisions, you've got a 15% corporate minimum tax that would affect companies that are profitable, but report relatively low tax rates. U.S.-based multinational companies face a different 15% minimum tax on their foreign income. They would pay at least 15% in each country in which they operate as part of the U.S. participation in the international agreement. And corporate stock buybacks face a 1% excise tax. And individual income taxes, the plan includes a 5% surtax on adjusted gross income above $10 million and an additional 3% on adjusted gross income above $25 million. Long story short on this one, where I'm at, Lance and I have talked about this before. If you didn't have so many freaking deductions and credits and all this stuff that make taxes so incredibly complicated and prevent the wealthy from paying their portion of taxes, then you don't have to keep increasing the top end of the tax rate. I think we've talked about before, and I'm sure there's people out there economically that can tell us why this is stupid, but you go to probably a universal corporation tax rate and a universal personal tax rate, and you eliminate pretty much all deductions and tax credits. And instead of tax credits, you just deliver those directly to people who have expenses that qualify. It's just a change in, rather than putting it on your taxes, you provide it to them as a non-taxable source of investment in their projects, rather than it coming through as a way to avoid paying the taxes. So it's really that's just a change in shifting that piece of how the money gets to you. But fundamentally, it simplifies the tax code. So again, you can react to that podcast at thestateofus.org. I don't like this because I think it complicates it. I mean, I don't like that there's a lot of wealthy people out there who pay less taxes than their secretaries. I think that's wrong. Okay. I'm on that same page. But I don't think that this really, it makes it more complicated. That's what it does. More complicated. I guess if we can't do that, then I would consider being supportive of this. But what I would rather like to see is a simplification of the U.S. tax code that just makes it harder to skirt paying your taxes. Housing and food aid. The reason we're bumping these together, the framework includes $150 billion for affordable housing, down from nearly the $330 billion that was in the plan. That breaks down into some other stuff, $65 billion to repair public housing, $25 billion for rental assistance, $15 billion for the Housing Trust Fund, and then food aid. The framework includes funding to expand free school meals during the school year and a $65 per child monthly benefit to help low-income families purchase food during the summer. Both of these, the reason I'm lumping them together is I am of the opinion that this is not the smartest way to spend the money. Do I think we should take care of people who are facing these troubles? Absolutely. Do I think that we should continue to throw money at a problem and not focus on how to solve the problem? No, it's like the college thing, right? Same reason I'm upset about that. Throwing more money at something that we are already having money problems with doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I don't think it makes sense here. I would rather equip these people to be able to afford better housing, equip these people to be able to afford to buy food, than to just continue to expand the programs that just take care of it. Do we have to make sure they have food while they're working to improve their life? Absolutely. But I don't see any money here to say, how do we get you out of the problem place? I don't see that here. I see, let's just give you this and then we'll feel better because, we did something. And it's like, yeah, but we just threw money at it again. We just threw money at it and hoped that it would get better. So there are my issues with the taxes, housing, and food aid. What do you think, Lance?
As far as the tax issue, 2 words, flat tax. And again, I know we'd have to negotiate what would it be and but a flat tax, we've done the show multiple times the last 10 years. Put your taxes on a postcard, send it in, pay the bill. So simple. And I also don't like the fact that the Democrats are planning to double the size of the IRS so that they can have tougher enforcement. Anytime you get more government officials creating more paperwork, that is not a good way to make money, even if they are going to better enforce the laws they already have. As far as the food thing, what you're talking about is we have a systemic problem. Why are these people always constantly struggling? Let's fix the problem. And yes, do go ahead and take care of them at the same time. That's a necessity, but it does seem to be, if you're not fixing the problem, long-term solution, it's not really going to do much good. So that's pretty much what I have there. I mean, it's
well, good. I'm glad I could summarize that well for us. But no, I mean, I felt like that's where Lance was pretty much going to be as well. Because again, you might say, well, what is the better answer on housing, food aid, et cetera?
Well, that's 3 other shows. I bet.
Right.
Well, what it is you don't take money. For example, they're going to take $65 billion to repair public housing. Wait a minute. We've tried this since the 50s and 60s. I'm not against public housing, but the way we're doing it doesn't work, because then why are we going to spend more money fixing stuff that's already bad, that's in disrepair? That's because we don't have a better idea. So we're going to take these bad ideas that we had and we're going to fix them because, honestly, and I agree with you guys out there that people shouldn't be homeless. All right. I understand it. But what's causing them to live in these horrible places that those of us who don't have to live there wouldn't choose to live there? So, they're not choosing to live there either. But why is that their best option that they have in their life? Let's fix that problem and go from there instead of, as Justin points out, throwing good money after bad. We already know it doesn't work. So we're going to spend more to upload because we got to have these people living somewhere besides on the streets. So that seems like such a defeatist attitude. There's got to be a better way to get this done.
Well, and there is. I mean, we talked about it again. Go back and listen to the child tax credit episode we just did like a week or 2 ago. And the reason I'm saying that is because in there we talk about the math and the statistics are available to support that one of the best places to spend money to break generational issues of poverty is at the child level, right? Especially early childhood education, but anything with students, especially after school programs, which we've talked about a lot. Every dollar invested saves $3 or more. That's a wonderful return on investment, and 70% of students that participate in after school programs improve their problem solving and STEM-based skills. Again, not rocket science here. Does that mean that we may take a hit in the short term because some of these things some of our public housing and stuff get worse? Yes. Does it mean that in the long term, 20, 30 years down the road, things are finally going to start to go in the right direction and that we're not just going to keep throwing more money after this? Yes, that's what it means. So it's a tough, I get that it's not an easy thing because people want to address what's right in front of them, but it's like there is a way to go about this to fix it long term. And that is to prepare students to be able to get the opportunities that get them out of the situations where they're stuck, whether it's housing or food or whatever it might be. We have to better prepare them to get out of those situations. And we're not doing a good enough job at it. So, and the synopsis, I guess, Lance, I mean, your thing is the compromise. My thing is I'm sick of people pretending like this isn't a big deal, of liberals being like, well, we're not really getting what we wanted. And it's like, okay, guys, if this passes, I mean, let's just be honest, right? Fox News is going to be all over. This is $1.85 trillion. Oh my God. This is humongous. And look at the expansion of all these social programs and it's crazy. And, so it's like the conservatives get it. They get that this is a big deal. Why are liberals so stupid as to be like, well, we didn't get what we wanted, so we're going to whine about it going into election year and point out all the ways that this is a failing. And again, it's my frustration is not, I really want, Democrats to win the midterms and secure everything and all this. It's that they're so stupid that they're going to lose because they can't get their heads out of their butts to figure out that this is a bad strategy. If you're pooping all over your own plan, that's, sorry, but are you really going to be surprised when you get walloped, when you're being as hard on it as your opposition? Again, 2 + 2, right? You're going to lose because you're being dumb. You could pass this. You could say, yeah, conservatives are right. This is a huge freaking deal. Look how awesome it is, and instead you're going to be dumb and be whining and complaining and doing your stomping your feet thing. And that's because that's what gets you reelected. And you're not going to say that. You're going to say you're standing on principle and making a change, and that's all crap. It's just so that you can raise your money and get reelected. And both sides do it. It's not just, the liberals, but that's what it is right now. That's what they're doing. So rather than passing something that could help people, we're going to whine and complain that it's not more of what we want, which isn't because we care about people. It's because we want the money to get reelected from those people. And we can say, well, we stood on principle, Okay, well, your principle didn't do a damn bit of good for anybody out here on the ground living day to day. That your principle didn't do squat. So just like the Republicans not playing ball on this, I think is disgusting because frankly, there's things in here that they should like and that they should be supportive of, not the least of which is the climate provision. It's absolutely asinine that they still want to say, well, we're not going to do anything about that because it's not real. And it's like, well, whether or not you think it's real, it is, and it's going to come bite you in the butt. And then you're going to have to spend more money than if we got out in front of this and started putting money into it now. So I can be equally upset at both sides for different reasons. But when the Democrats lose the midterms and they get walloped, I'm not going to be at all surprised because they're being as hard, if not harder, on their own legislation than the opposition.
So when President Biden ran on a campaign of bipartisanship, this is what he was talking about. He's reaching across the aisle, even within his own political party, between the centrist Democrats and the progressive Democrats. And he's also reaching out across the Republicans and saying, some of this stuff is just good for the country. And what you're saying is those people that are opposing this at this point, after all of the negotiations, I'm going to paraphrase for you, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. They're not going to see what they want. Well, they're not going to see what their constituents need and want for lack of vision, and they're going to hurt their own agendas. But that's honestly the way we feel, right, folks? And that's why we're here at True Chat and at the State of Us, is that we have a mission statement to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And that's what we've done. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you could criticize us for maybe some of the things that we